Hello and welcome back to Trashbug Toy Reviews. Today, as discussed previously, we are taking a look at the Shin Godzilla Evolution set. This includes his second and third form from the 2016 movie Shin Godzilla. Let's hash right into a little bit of the history of these guys. So again, these two made their first appearance in the 2016 film Shin Godzilla, and it was definitely a first for the monster. You know, we did have that initial evolution. In 1954, they did say it was a mutated dinosaur, and then later in the 90s in Godzilla vs. King Ghidorah, we actually see the Godzillasaurus. So it's not completely foreign to Godzilla, but seeing him evolve on screen in the moment was a totally new concept, and one most people think is inspired heavily by Ghidorah. Unique take on the monster, but again, it's not like it was without its basis. Just with that out of the way, they haven't really appeared since, but Godzilla in Singular Point has shown this evolution kind of feature of his, so it seems like it's going to influence Godzilla moving forward, which is pretty cool, but only time will tell how they actually choose to carry it on. With that out of the way though, let's hop right into things, because these two have only appeared in that initial movie first, and each of them was only in it for a few minutes each. As always, just a reminder to those coming back to the channel or those new here, I look at 3 core categories for my reviews. I'm looking first at the sculpt and detail for figures, then the color and paint applications, and then finally onto the articulation. We are going to look at things like accessories as well, but in this case there really isn't anything else. It was a bare bones release with just the 2 figures. So we're only looking at the figures today in those 3 core categories. Only thing that's going to change our scoring is again going to depend on the construction and things like that. Let's hop right into the first section here with the details and sculpt. So let's just start in here with the second form, commonly known as kumarakoon. So just looking here at the head, you can see the detail is beautifully captured. He has those nice big adorable little eyes. You can see inside his mouth here, it is beautifully detailed again, and they didn't skip out at all on the detail. Again, you can sort of see the roof of the mouth, although I'm not sure how well it's being captured on camera. Then same thing on the bottom of the mouth. And all the teeth are really nicely sculpted as well. You can see here moving down, he's got the gills where he was just absolutely pouring blood out in the movie, which was pretty sweet in my opinion. But those are captured beautifully, and you see the detail in there too. Again, in between the individual folds, you can see the gill detail is just absolutely beautifully captured on this figure. While we're going down here too, you can see the lines on the body, just emphasizing the muscles. And again, what's going to go on to become the keloid looking scarring on the big guy. But looking here on the back as well, you know, for such a tiny figure, the dorsal plates are captured wonderfully as well. In fact, my only complaint here is probably on this little one on the neck, where it's a little trimmed down, and I think that that was just unfortunately a necessity with the size of the figure and being able to allow it to articulate, but you don't really notice it unless you're looking super closely. Of course, you have these dinky little wavy boys of arms, his nice little chest point. Moving down to the legs as well, again, for how tiny they are, you can see the detail on them is impeccable. You have his little bumps on his legs. Just all the nice little skin folding and everything going on here. It's really, really well done. You have this little, like, I don't even know how to describe it, little bit of like wrinkled skin on here because of course in this version, we never see the actual first form of this monster, but it is heavily implied that it's some sort of amphibious sea creature that lives on the ocean floor. There are some like pictures floating around online, but I don't know if we've ever seen anything official as far as what this version of him looks like. The most we ever get is the tail, and I'm still convinced that that's actually this guy's tail, even though technically Bandai has officially released it, but again, that's a story for another time. You can see here though, going down the tail, again, each section is nicely detailed, and the dorsal plates cut off here towards the tip of it, all the way down to the very end where we get this little paddle thing that again just kind of looks like a tip of the dorsal plate. So super cool, but let's move on to the next guy over here, and this is Shin Godzilla's third form, otherwise known as Shinagawa-kun, and the names come from the district of, what is it called, Japan, where these guys attack. I'm not familiar at all with how Japan's city planning works, so yeah, no, if I'm getting anything wrong, please just leave a comment, let me know. I am not an expert in that regard, but let's take a look at this guy. When we first see him, we get that beautiful shot of him leaning up into the air, letting out his wonderful bellow, where they used the old Godzilla roar. And you can see that they've captured some skin folding on the inside of his mouth and just more of the like cheek skin on there. I don't know what the technical term is. I really should with how much I love animals and everything, but whatever. But you can see the inside of the mouth, the roof of it, and all the skin in here just captures that awesomely. It's not dead on, but again, for an articulated figure, this is about as good as it can get. Just to allow it to move and capture other poses in addition to that open mouth stance. You can see the detailing around the jaw and the head is great. All the teeth are sculpted out beautifully. And especially for it being this very jagged, monstrous look, the teeth work is just incredible. It captures them accurately, cleanly, and again, just monstrously. He's still got those big, beautiful eyes. And working down his head here, you can see again the dorsal plates on this guy are a lot better sculpted than on kumarakoon. Again, just has to do with his evolution. He's getting bigger. And the dorsal plates are used as like a vent system to cool him off. So it's really cool seeing how they did that with him. The gills on here are a little smaller, but still very nicely detailed. Going down the body here a little bit more, we have his dinky little arms. And like, you can just see here, I can't tell how well it captures on camera because it is so tiny, but for how small the figure is, the claws are just beautifully sculpted out on it. You can see the individual fingers and the individual fingernails on these guys. It's just, you know, no work was spared on this guy, bringing him accurately to life. It's really a bummer. It was a Japan exclusive. It took me forever to get my hands on these guys, but I'm really glad that I did. I really hope we get to see a nice, clean re-release at some point with maybe some better paintwork, but we'll talk about that in the next section. Moving down here, again, you can see the skin folding and wrinkling going on. Gives him this really cool effect. And the way that they've sculpted the body, I really like it because Shin in the movie, he does sort of have this like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like he's almost struggling to stand up. Like he's kind of learning how to walk on two legs. So he does have this little like awkward wonkiness about the way that he moves and the way that he stands and is posed throughout the entire scene that he's in. So it's really cool seeing that captured in a way that doesn't detract from the figure at all and still allows you to get him into all kinds of cool poses. But you can also go straight for what you actually saw in the movie as well. His legs are wonderful. Just look at the skin detail on here. It's super creepy. It almost has that like trypophobia kind of look where it's just the little holes. I really like how they did that. Again, just making Godzilla more of a horror icon. Going over here to the feet. You can see his nice little toesies are all sculpted out, and again, fingernails, beautifully, beautifully done. You have the little back of the foot there on the heel. And then just working down here, again, the skin is just unbelievably well detailed. Dorsal plates end before they even get to the tail now, but you can see the ridging. And then when we get to the very back here, we can see him start to take on that proper Shin Godzilla tail look. It's very skeletal, very much looks like the direction that it's heading in for the big guy. So all that said, between these two, they are going to take home a 5 in terms of detail and sculpting. For the size of them, just everything that went into it, I couldn't ask for more. It's awesome. Again, I can't tell you how happy I am to have these guys in my collection. Let's move right on to the color and paint applications now. So looking here at kumarakoon first, this is definitely going to be one of the weaker points of this. The paintwork is well done, but it's just not really accurate to what you see in the movie. You have a lot of the red around the gills, which is nice. The mouth, it's very, like, I don't want to call it lazily painted because it looks intentional, but the red going down so far on his mouth, it does really look like it was unintentional for the paintwork, even though based on the promotional pictures, based on the pictures I've seen of other people, it is very much what they were going for, but it just doesn't really work as well for this guy as I feel like it could. Going down, he's got some really nice counter shading going on. And on Kamada, at least, all the sections of the tail blend really well. So it's not bad, it's just, again, it's not quite what we saw in the movie. He was a little bit more of a tan color, a little bit more of a, like, brighter tan. Not as much of this sort of drab orange. It looks good, but it's just not quite as accurate as it could be. As well as that, if we look here at the chest, he's got more of this paintwork where, again, I think it's meant to look like this, and it looks kind of sloppily done, but I really don't know that it's supposed to look that way or if it's done on purpose. I really can't tell. I'm not the biggest fan of it, but it's also not like the worst I've ever seen. Let's move on to Shinagawa-kun though and take a look at, unfortunately, the biggest offender with this stuff. He's got a little bit more of a true to movie color scheme. He's got this like reddish hue to him, but just looking here at the tail especially first, you can see it just doesn't blend very well. You have this bright orangey bit on the tail, which looks good, but each section kind of blends it a little differently, and it breaks it up in a way that isn't the most pleasing to look at if you're looking up close. From a distance, it's okay, but this other side, you can really see it. You know, you got this tail section, which is a really dark, like, red covering on the top. The bottom section blends really nicely, but this top here, just sometimes it really breaks it up. And then you can see the division between the main body and the tail is just very, very noticeable. The paintwork is good though. It's not bad, it's just, it seems almost like separate people painted separate parts and didn't quite consider how they would blend together. The hands are nicely done. These blend in nicely and stick out, and the lighter color I quite like because again it emphasizes the hands, which on this guy, they are so good. The detail is incredible. You should be emphasizing these little puppies. But going up here again too, head's not bad, it's just very simple. They didn't do as much of the sloppy work on it, and the teeth are all beautifully painted. The eyes are nice, and the inside of the mouth is really well done. So I am going to give them props for that. As well, the back of the body is very nice as well. I'm going to give these guys a 4, and I do say that hesitantly because part of me wants to give them a 3, but the parts that are painted well are done very well, and it's only a few of these parts that detract from it. It's just I really wish that they went a little bit more screen accurate with them, or at least paid a little bit more attention to the blending on the figure. These are so good, but they're just a little shy of perfect, and it's a little bit of a bummer because Shinagawa-kun in particular, he was my favorite version of Godzilla from that movie. Just something about his awkward way of moving around and still being this giant monster was very appealing to me. But it's just a bummer the tail's not as good as it could be. But it's not the worst by any stretch. I hardly pay any big attention to it. It's just up close for the review. If you want screen accurate, dead on coloring, this just isn't quite going to be what you're going to get with this guy. So again, between the two of them, we're going to go with a 4. There's a little sloppiness on Kumarakoon, but I think it works in his favor in a lot of ways, and I think it's going to be a mixed opinion from fans. And Shinagawa-kun's good, just the tail, very poor blending on a lot of the sections. So let's move on to the final section here, the articulation. So looking here at articulation, again, we're just going to start here with Kumarakoon, the second form. You can see his jaw moves, his head moves, the neck moves. A lot of these sections are just limited by the design of the figure. To make it look as accurate as possible, they have sort of had to make sacrifices with the ability to move them. You can see here just looking from the top down, the neck has some posability, but it's again not amazing. The head has some posability, but again, not amazing. The jaw is probably the best part of the section up here. The arms, though they are technically articulated, I believe, they're not really well suited for it. It's not like it mattered much. The most you see with Kumarakoon is him wiggle his little paws, and you can sort of get him to do a little bit of that, but the way they're put in there, it's honestly just so fragile looking, I'm kind of scared to mess around with it too much. They just don't have a lot of motion. They have that raw chicken look that everybody seems to love about Kumarakoon, so as far as I'm concerned, that's enough. Looking here at the midsection, he does have a lot of motion here at the waist, and by a lot of motion I mean a little bit more than the neck, because it's still very limited, and with the way that the dorsal plates are set up, I would advise you to be very hesitant with moving it around so freely. Be very cautious of what you're moving because you don't want to be scraping anything into it. These are all very fragile parts up here at the top. You It's a little bit of a crunch with there. And then going down to the legs, this is where you get, again, a little bit more than before. But at the knees here, you get a little bit of rotation, which lets you pose a little bit, but it's nothing crazy. This is a waddling, wonky little guy, and, you know, the figure really lends itself to that and not much else. You can stretch the legs out a little bit or push them in just to change the way that he's standing. Is he trying to rub himself against the ground, or is he trying to lift himself up? The feet has a lot of joints, but because they're so small, they are a little weaker, so if you want to get him standing on his tippy toes, you can certainly do it, but it might just take you a little bit to mess around with it. The tail is nice. Again, it's sort of this flat look, so you can get into a good amount of poses, but it's not quite as posable as some of the rounder tails are. Again, just a matter of how it's designed. You can't really bend it down much at all except towards the tip, and you can only bend up so much. It's the side-to-side action that you get more of, and still it's very limited at the base. It's a lot more flexible at the end. So articulation isn't horrible by any stretch, but it's just, you're getting about as much as you see from the movie, just a little bit less in some parts, because he is limited in his way to stand straight up. Moving on here to Shinagawa-kun, you're going to see he has a lot more articulation. The jaw opens up like we said before. The head moves a little bit, but that again, just based on the construction, is pretty limited. The neck has some better articulation. You can actually turn it around a little bit, and that's thanks to this double joint and the way that the upper joint is a little bit longer in there, and there's less dorsal plates towards the back, so it lets you bend them forward a little bit more. I like this because it again sort of lends itself to giving him these awkward poses. So you can capture some motions that you saw in the movie, but then also make your own, and it sort of just looks natural for what this animal would do. The main neck joint here doesn't have a lot of motion, but it's kind of just supporting the other one. The paws don't have a full 90 degree. I am absolutely not doing that with my figure. They look so fragile and they're so nicely done, and this set is so rare now that there is no way I'm chancing breaking this guy. So take it from me, you don't want to, and if you do, that's fine. You be a crazy person on your own time. The waist here is really nice. You can see, again, you get a lot of motion here, just a tiny bit of a crunch at the top one. Dorsal plates get in the way of most of it, but near the bottom here, the dorsal plates separate a little bit easier, so you can get a lot more extreme posing out of this. Like with kumarakoon, I am going to say that you want to be very careful moving it around because the dorsal plates are very fragile, and probably more so on this guy because they stick off a little bit more, and you just don't want to snap anything off by accident. Just be mindful while you're moving him here. The legs are much more posable than kumarakoon's as well. Get a ton of motion out of them, relatively speaking. The knee joints kind of just go up and down. They feel like they're on a ball joint, but you can't do much other than move them up and down. And then the feetsies are so nice. They're a little bit more stable than kumarakoon's and let you get them into some pretty nice poses, actually. You're not going to be able to do anything extreme, but you can move him around and have him supported on his tippy toes with little trouble. You're going to need his tail to balance, but it is nice knowing that, again, you can get him in some more extreme poses and you will be able to support him with that. His tail is much, much more posable than kumarakoon's, but some of the joints are a little loose, so just be careful of things popping off. Like you just see here, tip of the tail likes to pop off quite a bit. But the way the ball joints are designed on the tail, and the way that there's so many more sections on the tail, does lend it to be a little bit more posable than kumarakoon's. Just again, hopefully you don't get a version with this tip of the tail that likes to pop off like mine. Overall, the articulation is good, but I am just going to give it a 3 because, again, the design of the figure, I much prefer it to be more accurate, but it does unfortunately lend itself to being a little bit harder as far as articulation is concerned. So the articulation isn't quite as good as the sculpting, but I would rather have the sculpting more than this any day of the week, because these are honestly more of like a set piece with the bigger Shin Godzilla. But they're so cool on their own still. It's just don't go home expecting them to be like these crazy figures you can get in these unbelievable poses. They're good, but I've definitely seen better. To shotgun some size comparisons, let's just take a quick look at the Godzilla Jr. SH Monsterarts figure. He's in a similar size scale to Shinagawa-kun, but he's just a little bit smaller, which is kind of cool. I like having them yet together because I kind of think of Shinagawa-kun as the modern take on something like a Godzilla Jr. for Shin Godzilla. Here he is next to the Destroya Evolution set, the crab form. Here he is next to the Awakening form of Shin Godzilla, again from SH Monsterarts. And just for one last one, here is him next to the 90s version of Godzilla. This is the Awakening version, I believe it's called. It's the one from forever ago that's been re-released a dozen times. So, totaling up the scores from our 3 categories, we have a 4, a 4, and a 3. Dividing that total down is going to bring us to 3.6, and again, just like Sideswipe in our previous review, we're just going to round that right up to a nice even and neat 4, which I think is perfect for these guys. They have a couple shortcomings, but they really are great, and I can't recommend them enough. With aftermarket prices, you are looking at spending anywhere from $150 if you get lucky to upwards of $200 or more, and I can't say that I recommend them for that price. You know, if you're a Shin Godzilla completionist, definitely I say go for it. They're really nice figures, but they aren't something that I'm drawn to play with constantly, and part of that is their delicate nature. The other part of that is just a couple of the shortcomings with them. They're not something that I look at and I'm crying with joy over all the time. But they are certainly amazing figures, and I cannot recommend them enough if you do really like Shin Godzilla, like myself. So thank you guys so much again for joining me for this review. I know ever since I opened these up on my Instagram, people have been excited to see them, and I'm really glad I got to talk about them today. Let me know your thoughts. If you have these guys, let me know if you agree or disagree with my rating. Like I said, I love them, and Shin Godzilla is probably my favorite Godzilla movie, shy of the original 1954, so this was a must-have for me, but again, they have a couple of shortcomings. I really like them, but I can't give them a 5 in good conscience because they're just not that perfect grade figure. If you're interested in seeing more of my content, you can check down below to links to my socials, but my Instagram, as always, is @trashbugtoys. I post tie-in posts, and constantly I'm using my story to update about toys that I'm interested in, like, again, more monster stuff, dinosaurs, Transformers, since Rise of the Beast is coming out soon. That's been very popular lately. Check it out if you're interested. Otherwise, take care and enjoy. Again, I hope you enjoyed this review.